Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is your Grandpa Casey. Today I'm going to be going over important steps on building a PC. Now in step one, I went over how to set up that motherboard, installing the heatsink, and all of things like that. And this one over here, today we're going to be actually putting in the motherboard, power supply, and running our cables. One of the most important things is how do you route the cables and the studs that we're going to go into it. So I'm going to go step by step. So if you're new to PC building, this is a great step-by-step guide. If you're an old PC builder, you might learn something today from Grandpa. Anyway, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and give your grandpa a hug. Let's get started. For order of simplicity, the first thing you're going to be doing is once you've got your motherboard, set it up, put the fan on and everything on, and taking pictures of all of your connectors so you can see them, I want you to take a close look and look at all the different pins here where you're going to screw on your motherboard. And make sure that they align with all of the holes on your motherboard. There's nothing worse if you don't have enough studs that hold up the motherboard, because the motherboard could bend and crack. Now the other thing, of course, is in your space here, which is in the front, you want to make sure that you align your I/O shield so that it's properly set, because once you put the motherboard in, it could be a real challenge putting it back in. The thing is, getting in your I/O plate in be a little tricky, and I usually try to push the back end in first on one side, and then I use a block of wood to go along the edges here very slowly and push it into place. Otherwise, if you don't do that, it could bend the I/O plate as you're trying to get it in. You can see as I take my board, I can gently push it in. You didn't hear it click. And eventually, you'll get it in place. Like I said, while you have it on, notice that I happen to have it on the static bag hanging over the frame. I like to put on my hard drive LED reset power switches on before I put the motherboard into the case. I find it's really much easier doing this, because once you've got it in the case, it seems that, the way the case is set with all the wiring and everything else, it gets a little difficult to do this. So doing it this way is just the simplest way. The next thing that I like to do is make sure I know where 1, 2, 3, 4 is. Now, a lot of motherboards, if you're going to use a NVM RAM and put it into the motherboard, the port SATA 2 doesn't work. It actually uses SATA 2 to do that. So when you're plugging up your cords, be aware that SATA 2 may work. Your manufacturer may be different. So those are some of the things that you want to be looking at. The other thing, of course, is right over here. I have two more SATA connections. Now, because they're in an odd place, I recommend plugging up any cables that you're going to be using before you actually put the motherboard in, because trying to get them in later, real challenge. Let's go on. So once you've got the motherboard in place, and do that gently, like I said, and if you noticed I plugged in a cable into that, because that's going to be an extra drive, I make sure that once I've seated in place and put it in place where it has to go, I begin putting my screws in. Now, I always start with the one by the CPU first, go on the other side first. Don't tighten them. Just put them loose, go to the opposite side, go to the back, and then put all your screws in. And then once you've got them in there and you know that everything is in place, tighten everything, okay? So let me put these screws in. I'll be right back with you. You can see I've installed the motherboard and plugged in my hard drive connectors. The hard drive connector is connected into SATA 1. The second hard drive is connected into SATA 3. And the last one is connected into SATA 5. That's going to be my CD-ROM. Now, I try to always leave SATA 2 off, because later on, if I decide to put a NVM RAM right here, a lot of motherboards reserve SATA 2 for that use. And I don't know particularly with this board. I'm also going to be adding another port that it's going to be plugged into an extender board that's going to also give me another USB set of USB 3.0 sockets. So the next thing I like to do after this is to install the power supply. Again, I try not to install the power supply until I've installed everything else, because the power supply takes up a lot of room in the case, and it just gives you more room to do that. Also, you'll notice that I've fished all the cables underneath these holes to give the most amount of air volume going through. Let's go and get the power supply. What you can see here is I pulled my power supply after installing all my cables out the hole in front of it to the back of the side of the PC. As you can see, I've run all my cables in the back here so they don't interfere, and they look nice when you have a glass cover and you have all your lights and everything else. And this way I can run all my cabling so that it doesn't interfere with airflow, but also it looks nice. So I'm going to connect everything and be right back with you. Continuing, you can see as I've connected multiple cables, and I've run the cables underneath the frame of the, and making sure that everything just is neatly. You can see that the cable is tie wrapped going over to the board. Everything you do, you want to be nice and dressed and pushed. So you can see here, I told you about that extra USB 3.0, and I have a riser board going in there. So the last thing I'll be doing is putting the fans in, and then I'll put my video board in. The last thing when you're hooking up your video board, as you can see, there's two connectors here. But when you look at my PSP-CE connector, oh my goodness, it has 8. This has got 4 or 6. How am I going to make this work? Well, if you look closely at your PNC connector, right, you'll notice that this piece is slipped on, and you'll be able to pop this off, slide it back, and then you'll have 6 instead of 8. And the same thing on the other connector, and now you'll be able to use that. Let me do that right now. As you can see, I've just finished everything. And as you can see very carefully, I've taken all the wires and run them through the back of the frame. This allows us to keep all the inside of the PC clean and neatly dressed. And since the PC has a clear cover, I want to be able to see without having all the wires distract me from the contents. So we've come down to the very finish. Now you can see it's done, and I have run my wires. I've used a tie wrap to adjust all the wires so they're not going to get in the way. They're not going to impede airflow. And everything looks clean and tidy. The only thing now is to power it up, make sure it works, and then I'll finish up with all the extra memory and like that. But like I've said, I like to try starting up the system, setting up the BIOS, doing all the things, and then put my last of my memory in last, because this way I know that I have minimal components while I'm doing this. Anyway, I'm going to leave you the links for all the parts I used, and I'll be back with you in just a second. So we're coming to the end of this show. Don't forget to check out our other videos, our other reviews, our other product reviews. Don't forget to check out the first video on setting up the motherboard. Now you have how to put it together, and we'll be putting a video on how to load the software is on my channel also. I'm going to leave you some links. You can give us a thank you. You can become a Patreon, or you can buy Grandpa a cup of coffee. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to leave you the links for all the different things I used in this video, including the case, the thermal grease, the screwdriver, everything, special tools that I used. And what I didn't mention during the video, and I want to be very important, is that I do use a static strap attached to my wrist to ground myself, because computer components are very sensitive to static, and if you don't put on a static band, you can damage them. So check out my other videos, give us a cup of coffee, and use the links in the description to look at the products that I have recommended. This is your Grandpa Casey out. You have a great day, and I'll see you in my next video. And don't forget, Grandpa loves you.